to another blog explanation video. This is for the training phase 24th of July leading up to the 20th of August. So as always, a 4-week training phase. If this is the first time you watch one of these videos and you're new to the program, then the way we go through this kind of video is that we use this funnel method where we start with a very broad global overview, and then we get more and more narrowed down and more specific. We go into the weekly overview, and then we go into the daily overview. So the global overview essentially is about the different themes that we have in CrossFit, which at least how we categorize it: engine, gymnastics, weightlifting, and strength. Then the weekly overview will look at how we are incorporating these on a weekly basis. How many times do you touch base on them, and which days will they be placed on? And the daily overview, we might not spend that much time on. That will essentially be about how the training day evolves across the 4 weeks. So what's the progression, so that you understand the red thread inside of the program. The long text on the left side of your screen, if you haven't read that before or heard me say it, it's the explanation of why we do this video in the first place. It's how we build the program. So in short, essentially we use this block periodization system where we use these 4-week training blocks. They're typically inside of a larger training phase, either 8 or 16 weeks. It could also be 12, depending on which of the 3 different formats that we have for engine, strength, weightlifting, and gymnastics. It's my job to provide you guys with the best roadmap possible to become the best CrossFit athlete. Despite your ambitions, despite if you want to be a CrossFit Games athlete or compete at a local weekend throwdown, it's my job to make sure that you get as close to your goal as possible. And we do so by explaining these videos in depth like this. This video also works together with our long-term development focus for the athletes, ensure to stay healthy and progress through a very logical step-by-step pathway to avoid plateaus. That's why we also use this, I wouldn't say constantly varied system, but we use this undulating periodization system where we're varying the stimulus essentially to ensure that you can continue to progress over and over again. The most important part of training is that if you want to be good at something, you must above all else be consistent. And my job as the programmer and coach is that my job is to protect that. So it's not just looking at how you can be consistent, it's how do we avoid things coming in the way of that consistency, injuries, overviews, and those kind of things. A thing we added last year was our testing system. We have various engine tests that goes from like cyclical endurance, cyclical power, mixed cyclical, CrossFit endurance, and CrossFit Classic couplet. We have our gymnastics tests. Some are strict biased, some are capacity biased, some are interference biased. We have absolute strength tests. These are our back squat, our deadlift, our press, our pull-up. And then we have our weightlifting tests, which are speed strength tests, so 1RM maxes for power variations, squat variations, as well as capacity testers. Some are low tension, so light load, high repetitions, or high tension, which is typically the opposite. You have an overview of them here. We use these tests in order to create benchmarks for you guys, in order to create our own sort of studies and learnings, I would say. So if we can see that there's correlation between your 1RM strict pull-up and your max unbroken chest to bars, we can now place more emphasis on that 1RM strict pull-up, because we know there's not only one way to develop higher capacity for chest to bars. So we want to try to draw these sort of conclusions. If your legless rope climbs test is super good, is there a big chance that your max unbroken ring muscle up is also good, or vice versa? So we're trying to develop a little bit of tendencies and benchmarks, and also to help you guys guide better in which category you fit in best: elite, RX, or intermediate. We might actually change the name of these 3 to games, quarterfinals, semifinals, and an open level. Yeah, here are the tests. They will be found inside of challenges on Fitter, so you'll be able to log your scores. There's not a specific system of when they're being dropped in the year because it depends on the season. Typically, if there's a lot of qualifiers in certain phases, or the Open, the semifinals, etc., we don't want to be dropping tons of tests there, as you're already exposed to a lot of tests through the season. So we'll primarily put them in like our off season, preseason, and then inside of the in season, we try to slow down a bit on those. In front of you, you have sort of the calendar year. A little disclaimer before reading it. When I say off season, preseason, in season, there is a difference between the three. But in our training program, we do not go through very rough changes, which means that even if you're in off season, you're still good to compete. There's just a slightly more bias towards competing in the in season as well as the preseason. So this doesn't mean you can't compete from August to November. It just means there's a larger focus on aerobic base work. There's a larger focus on basic strength work. There's a larger focus on strict strength for gymnastics and those kind of things. But the way the program works is that we do pretty much touch base on everything throughout the whole year. So you are going to be good enough shape to compete at any stage, but you will be in your best shape when it's in season, of course. So as you see, the yellow is marked with off season. There's pretty much 4 months, then there's preseason 3 months, and then there's in season for the remaining. Gymnastics, you'll see it says format 1, 2, 3. We also have a format 4 that kind of looks like the format 3 that we also incorporate. This is the plan A right now. As we learn and we get better, we might develop more formats, more things, and that means things will change depending on if we learn something that could be even better for you. For strength, we always alternate between absolute strength and hypertrophy, and we keep doing that all year long, so nothing really changes in that front. We're just trying to get you guys stronger and stronger little by little. Weightlifting, same as strength, it just works in the opposite. Battery or like volume work, and then speed strength work. So those two were kind of like working opposing of each other. So when one is in intensification, one is in volume, and vice versa. We do that to avoid overloading you guys too hard with intensification. It's a typical like classic mistake that you're basically just building up across all elements in a 12-week block, and in the end you're just fried. So this is our undulating periodization system that allows you to feel good and just progress little by little all year. Engine, format 1, 2, and 3. I'll show you guys those as well. They're also very similar to each other. There's just certain biases that we'll go through. I'll just read a quick text for you guys, which is set under here. When we build a training program, we analyze and identify what the necessary attributes of an athlete in the sport must be to achieve success. In this training program, we plan in reverse. We start with your end goal, and then we work our way backwards from there to develop a plan of action. One of the reasons why this training program came alive was because I tried many template programs and felt that the volume and intensity led to injuries and burnout. Progress is easily achieved with a 12-week hard training block when squatting 3 times a week. But what happens after? Every peak is followed by a valley. We structure the program in a way that allows for constant small peaks, which helps us avoid big drop-offs and valleys. Our training reflects that where we are in the year, off-season, pre-season, in-season, and the qualities we try to develop, adjust accordingly. Our goal is to have you feel A, constant progress through consistent good training weeks, B, feeling good, injury-free, and C, motivated and driven as you see and understand excuse me, the intention of how the program is structured. A little triangle here. So in front of you, you have 3 out of the 4 gymnastic formats. They are all quite similar. So especially format 1 and 2. Essentially, format 1 is what we're going to do now. We're going to have 4 weeks where there's a higher bias of fundamentals, which means we're focusing on strict strength, we're isolating the gymnastics, we're looking at slow eccentrics, we're looking at pauses, isometric work. We are though still having 3 interference pieces with gymnastics on a weekly basis where you get exposure to all of the kipping exercises. So it has a higher focus on developing basic strength for gymnastics, but you will also see that there are still things to improve your capacity with kipping and also improve your ability to express that capacity inside of workouts. We will then move on to isolated volume accumulation. Here we'll look at basically isolating the gymnastic exercises and building capacity in them and using different formats. In the third piece, we'll then start to interfere a lot with the gymnastics. We're going to start putting cyclical exercises, and essentially the next step from there would be to use complementary exercises, or exercises that don't directly interfere with the gymnastic exercise. And then we go into non-complementary, which is exercises that do interfere a lot and therefore makes it a lot more challenging. So that's format 1 that we are exposing you guys to now. For strength and weightlifting, I touched base on this. Because strength and weightlifting have a lot of overlapping elements, movement patterns, stressors, and adaptations and benefits, in order to get most out of both, we use a system where, like I said, you see here in the illustration, when volume is high in one, it's low in another, and vice versa with intensity. Yeah, that's it for that. For engine, we are in our format number 1. And here we basically primarily regulate intensity through what you see right here, our 4 sort of self-made intensity levels: builder, threshold, grinder, and hurt locker. We put a name on it to make it a bit easier for you guys to differentiate between them, and also because we can't use only heart rate zone as one kind of baseline for what we're looking for. Because if you are for example doing a mixed modal piece, heart rate zone would be probably a pretty bad indicator of where you are, depending on the exercises that are picked. Maybe there are ring muscle ups, you're not very good at those, and therefore you can't get your heart rate into zone 4. But if it's something purely cyclical like running, for example, you've done a VO2 max test and you know where your heart rate zones are approximately, then we can use that as a great indicator. Then we have RPE, which is more a subjective sort of intensity marker. It's how you're feeling on the day. And then we have the feel or the gear, which is another subjective marker. It should feel easy or moderate, hard or full gas. And so that's the ones we used here. And you see there's a little graph here that shows intensity on the y-axis and duration on the x-axis. The color, the darker the color, the more intense the piece is, and the lower duration it will be, and vice versa. So that's basically how we identify it, and that's how you'll see it in the program. As always, we use a concurrent model where we basically touch base on all energy systems, time domains throughout the whole year, as well as in this training block. Here are a lot of the overviews for what we have been through already, and the one that's highlighted in gray will be the one that we're doing right now. There it is. Okay, so in this training block, we are in the second undulating periodization for our strength weightlifting piece, which means that we have intensification for strength, and that will be 4 weeks. The frequency is 3 sessions a week. It has 3 anterior lower body exercises, 3 posterior lower body exercises, 2 upper body anterior, and 2 upper body posterior. So anterior is the front side of the body, posterior is the back side of the body. The progression will be that, so we're using for the primary lifts, back squat, deadlift, and bench press. We are using a progression with cluster sets. Its load increases weekly, volume decreases. Very classic linear progression. The drop sets or the cluster set goes from 4 sets of 2-2-2. Then next week 4 sets of 2-2-1. Then again 1 rep less, and then again 1 rep less in the last week. So we go from 6 reps total in a per set 5, 4, and finish off with 3, and percentages will increase accordingly. The intent is that this is a neurological and maximal strength phase. We're looking at adaptations here, and we get those through load and velocity. Those are the key elements for power. So we want to make sure that we're using a load where you can still express enough velocity so you're not grinding through all of the reps, or you're getting speed, as that's a really important part of getting strong and powerful. In the previous phase, we've been through hypertrophy. We still have hypertrophy touches right now, but it's not a main focus. The main focus is the intensification. But the hypertrophy bias in the last training block was that we are increasing the amount of muscle fibers available, and we're increasing the size of them as well. And in this phase, we're trying to improve your ability to recruit them and fire them and make them contract as hard as possible. The tempo is control for the eccentric, but not slow. So we don't want an eccentric that could affect your concentric. So if you're lowering it so slow that it will affect your power upwards, it's too much. And it's also too fast if you cannot control the downward going phase, because then you won't be aligned well enough to really apply force upwards. The concentric phase is explosive. It's as fast as possible from bottom to top. Yeah, so we're really trying to contract as forcefully as possible through those reps. The hypertrophy support work we're doing will be using reps in reserve as the indicator for intensity. We'll go from 3 reps in reserve to 2 to 1, and there's an explanation in the program how and what that should feel like. And we're essentially doing that to build like more muscle fibers, new contractile tissue. Second. Just lost it for a second. There you go. And here the pace or the tempo is eccentric has to be super slow, because that's the most valuable portion for hypertrophy. And the concentric is just controlled, so it's not explosive, because if we do that, then you might be carried by momentum, and then we don't really get that full tension that we're looking for in that range of motion. So for weightlifting, we're looking at accumulation. We're gonna use 2 sessions a week on that. We have one that's snatch biased, one that's clean and jerk biased. We're trying to develop capacity, and we're doing that with high tension work, as our primary focus of the lifts will be a little bit heavier and they will be isolated from workouts. So we're trying to just isolate and just build that capacity at those sub-maximal loads. Yeah, we will alternate between snatch, power snatch and squat snatch weekly, and squat clean and split jerk, and power clean and push jerk weekly, to avoid overloading the squat patterns. There's a progression line between the 4 weeks. Week 1 and 2 is similar in terms of just changing whether it's a squat or a power version. And in week 3 and 4, we're making the format slightly harder, giving you more reps at the heavier percentages and increasing the load. Then for gymnastics, we're in format 1, which was what I explained before, the fundamentals bias with more strict strength isometric work. We're using the core principle of the program, where we move from general to specific, from extensive to intensive, from slow to fast, and isolated to integrated. So this is the left side of the spectrum. It's going to be very general. So exercises like pike handstand push-ups, that's quite a general exercise that's not 100% specific to handstand push-ups, but will help that exercise. So that's what we mean by general. Slow tempo work, and then we will build speed inside of the exercise across these coming training blocks. And the same with the isolated going into the integrated. We are developing you in an isolated format, as that makes more sense for strength development, and then we will try to integrate it more across the different training blocks. Yeah. And then for our engine, Like I said, we're using that engine format 1 where we're using builder, threshold, grinder, hurt locker as the indicators. We will also use some of our classic models or formats or protocols like advanced sets protocol, where we're alternating the order of the exercises every set to make it more challenging for pacing. We're using our increasing pace protocol, which allows for more volume and allows you to learn how to pace better and know your paces better. And then we're using these work or wave or metabolic flexibility protocols, where we alternate between paces that are very high and very low, but essentially without a lot of rest. And which again allows us for more volume, which is absolute key when you want to build durability. And then we have, of course, task-orientated for time workouts and time-orientated AMRAP workouts. On a weekly basis, this is the weekly overview, which is session 1 is the first line you see there. It's only for the podium chases. There are 2 of these sessions available as optional extras on Sundays for power hour and for compete. If you have days where you feel like you have energy for extra sessions, then that is a possibility. But for the main session, which is one you see below, that's similar for all training programs. Power hour will have less of the hypertrophy strength work, as it just takes too much time to fit inside of the 60 minutes, as well as a little bit less working sets on the strength and weightlifting exercises. So we will have strength on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Same format, some neurological work with the primary lift either being back squat, deadlifts, or bench press. Then you have hypertrophy work with 2 exercises that you'll superset. You'll have engine threshold gymnastic interference piece, so a piece that's like 80 to 85% effort with a lot of gymnastics interference, where you either will do something that's pulling, pressing, or compression, and we'll alternate those every week. On Tuesdays, on Fridays, we have weightlifting. It's the isolated work. And then we have our gymnastics fundamental strength work, which will have like a high skill piece of the pull, press, and compress exercises, and then followed by low skill piece with the pull, press, and compress. And then there's a grinder where there's no gymnastics inside. It will be very simple exercises allowing you to push yourself, because we want to get into that 90% intensity. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the blog. There is the daily overview, but I've touched a lot on that already, how the things will progress in terms of strength and weightlifting, which is the primary things. And yeah, best of luck with the training block. I'm looking forward to joining it when I get back from the States. And as always, if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'll be answering as fast as possible. Yeah, have a great training block. Looking forward to getting started.